Hello and many thanks for joining us once again. You're watching Smart 24 Television and this is the Policon. Here we discuss matters to do with politics and economics, and for wherever you are definitely catching us from, many thanks for joining us once again. And well, of course, we are on mainstream, that is channel 320 GOTV, and channel 372 is for the DSTV subscribers. And also, if you want to get us via free-to-air decoders, you can fully watch Smart 24 Television 24/7, as you can definitely get yourself more in touch with the world of business by understanding the few dynamics here and there, including wonderful content that is basically driving business and mainly giving you the information that you deserve as a business person. Well, of course, today's discussion, though, is going to be rotating around a little bit of the budget, which is coming up in the next financial year, 2023-2024. But however, we want to look at how the youth can involve in the budget cycle, something that is quite a very huge concern amongst everyone out there. So it is something that we need to engage the young people, most especially if we want to establish a more kind of situation that the youth can lead various conversations. Now, this particular topic won't be mine alone to discuss. I'm joined by Mr. Kafuko John Paul, who's coming in from the Youth for Tax Justice Network to give us more of what it means for the youth to be engaged in this budget cycle. Many thanks for joining us, sir. And this is welcome to the Policon.
Thank you very much, and thank you to our viewers for joining us today for this show. And I'm also glad to be here. I cannot wait to get into the discussion.
All right, briefly for the viewers, what does the Youth for Tax Justice Network represent?
The Youth for Tax Justice Network is a Pan-African organization. We work for young people, and we work in areas to do with domestic resource mobilization. What I mean by domestic resource mobilization is basically having the voices of young people involved in issues of economic justice.
Okay.
How, for example, are revenues collected, how are they utilized, and how are they spent.
Okay.
You know, when it comes to, for example, as we are going to talk about the budget, we are going to see that when after the minister has read the budget, and you know, it is the allocations that have been made to the different sectors, and the money is disbursed. You know, these sectors they call them the accounting officers, are supposed to account for this money and ensure that it is used for whatever it has been budgeted for. You can talk about, for example, the parish development model, where the number of people, of young people especially, you know, involved. Yeah. So we are basically a young organization. We work towards amplifying youth voices in issues to do with domestic revenue mobilization and economic issues.
Speaking of amplifying youth voices, how far have you come as the Youth for Justice Network? I need to at least understand, because as we speak of the fact that you are a voice, the catchword there is the voice.
Yeah.
The only issue around these various conversations is to feel the impact of the youth. Is their voice heard well enough, or we really need to add more, you know, more platforms for them to air out their issues and everything? How far have you gone with ensuring that the young generation or the youth of this era are heard of amongst the policymakers?
Yes, as Youth for Tax Justice Network, what we usually do, we've come up with a number of platforms where we give young people a chance to voice out their issues. For example, we usually have debate competitions, and usually these are between youth in institutions of learning, universities or higher institutions of learning generally. We usually have such where young people debate about different issues. We are going to have one later this year, but it's going to be focused around the Africa Continental Free Trade Area, how the young people can participate in it. And then also there are some protocols which are developed around the Continental Free Trade Area. So we want young people's voices to be heard. You know, we want to get their views on what they want to be in these protocols. Maybe just to give you a background, last year we met the Secretary General of the Africa Continental Free Trade Area, and we shared a certain research finding we made. And one of the feedback that the SG gave us was that we should do more consultations with young people to get their views on what should be included in this protocol. You know, the protocol right now is being negotiated. So this debate which we are going to have, it's going to happen next month. It's one of the avenues. But we've been having such debates since 2019. We've even had a number of essay writing competitions. And usually when these competitions happen, after, we usually get an outcome document. And it's what we use to engage policymakers. We do a lot of work. We do a lot of sharing this information with policymakers, especially around the budget cycle. You know, proposals which we feel are youth-friendly, tax proposals especially which are youth-friendly, which can help them survive in business. We have done quite a number of, a lot of work with small and medium enterprises, and we usually get their views on what they feel should be included in some of these tax proposals. But we also do some education, especially around taxation, you know, in general, because for most, especially the SMEs, taxation is a big issue for them. Being compliant is very, very, very challenging for them. Most of them do not know the procedures and what they can do. So we do a lot of education around this, because, you know, voices, you know, for you to amplify, to come up with a voice, to have a voice about something, you can only do that if you are knowledgeable about it. You cannot just speak about anything. You must have knowledge about it. So usually we do a lot of trainings, capacity buildings, to, you know, to empower these young people to have a voice of their own. So usually that is what we are doing, training. We also do a number of engagements with, for example, the National Youth Council. In Uganda here, we've done a lot of engagements with Jacob and his team. We are constantly in touch. We've done a number in Kenya, in Southern Africa, with it's called the Southern Africa Youth Forum. We do a lot of work with these people. We do a lot of capacity buildings, engagements, but also pushing for policies, youth-friendly policies, which especially when it comes to taxation and raising domestic revenues. So these are some of the platforms that we've set up, but most of it is really engaged. It is targeted, let me say, targeted towards policy reform, because we feel that it all starts with the laws or the policies
that are being put up.
Yes, it's what impacts the young people at the end of the day.
Okay.
Yeah.
And today we want to understand what the budget cycle means to the young people, to the youth. And in your own understanding, what does the budget cycle represent and what does it entail altogether?
The budget cycle is quite a broad thing, but just to break it down for young people, because, you know, one thing I've learned about young people over time, they do not like complex stuff. They like things which are very simple and straightforward.
For them to digest.
Exactly.
There is no room for bureaucracy, by the way.
Exactly. I never see young people reading graphs and then reading
break it down for them. They have no time for cram work.
Everyone is looking for money. Everyone is looking for ways to survive.
Too focused on
exactly.
Things,
so,
very true.
So in a nutshell, the budget cycle is, and I'm talking about it from the, let's say, from the country level, at a national level. How does, for example, Uganda? Let's talk about Uganda. How does Uganda raise its resources? Where does it get the money? Which you hear the minister saying, "Oh, we've given a parish development model this amount of money. We've given let's say, which other sector can I talk? Maybe ICT, we've given them." Where does the government get this money from? That is the first stage. And usually, if you look at our budgets, usually it's from debt. We borrow a lot, but we also get a number of grants. And then another source is usually taxation, which for us as Youth for Tax Justice Network, and I would encourage all of us to appreciate that it's the most sustainable way. Because when you look at something now like debt, you have to repay it back, and usually it comes with interest, which is detrimental to young people. You know, at the end of the day, you have to repay it back. And as you are going to see, if you look at our budget, even the budget for this coming financial, but even for the past financial year, we are spending a lot of money paying interest on debt. A large chunk of our budget is being transferred to interest, which is very detrimental to us as young people. So the next stage is how this money is allocated. And allocation, I think we've all heard of the budget reading. Usually that's why it happens. That's why it comes to the public. But usually it even happens before in Parliament, you know. Exactly, giving money, for example, to ICT, to agriculture, to education. and all those sectors and how much is being given, in these various sectors. Then the third aspect I will talk about is the utilization. Once this one has been allocated to these different sectors, is it being utilized for that purpose? For what
it's supposed to
exactly
to achieve?
Exactly is the intended target being achieved at the end of the day. That's where utilization comes in, and that's where we always hear about the Auditor General. Usually he audits public expenditure and usually comes up with a report annually, and there, of course, there are a number of issues that are raised. Some are addressed, some are not. So for me, in a nutshell, that is how I would break down the budget cycle for young people. I hope it is easy enough for everyone to understand. If you go and look at for example, the Ministry of Finance website, there is a lot of information. There are a lot of graphs, pie charts.
And not everyone is willing to.
Exactly, no one is going to read all that stuff. But in a nutshell, this is where it all rotates around that.
Okay.
Those three aspects.
Well, let's look at the fact that at the start of the journey of the budget, I believe once the national budget is presented, that is when we start tracing for the next financial year. That is when we start writing or preparing a budget framework paper. So immediately the first disbursement of funds is done, sectors start to write down or create reports for their next financial year projections. Exactly. And now the budget framework paper is starting. Exactly. Is this the right time to involve the young people once the budget has been presented? Because they are hardly seen anywhere around the presentation.
Yes, the best time usually is because at least I know government usually does some small consultations right from local government level on what should be included in the budget. Right from, for example, usually the budget reading starts, it is done usually on 30th June. Usually they start as early as July, September to do those consultations, Sure. And they usually go at the grassroots. They start from the grassroots, and usually they involve, I cannot say it is very inclusive a process, but usually they do it at local government level. The fact that we have youth representatives at local government may appear as if the young people are involved, but it is not very elaborate and very wide to say that. But usually that is the best time to to ensure that young people's voices are added into this issue of budget making and the budget cycle. But also I know that usually when, for example, the tax bills, when they usually come to Parliament or even at the Ministry of Finance level, usually there is a chance for the public to make input. For example, they usually invite alliances. They can invite, for example, the Uganda Law Society, the Uganda Manufacturers Association, quite a number of associations. But from us, we also usually have an umbrella called Tax Justice Alliance, and we usually go and make input on some of these bills, to influence and ensure that whatever is coming out of the laws is good enough for us as young people. So these are all avenues in which young people can always engage and participate. They also usually, meanwhile, invite SMEs, the Federation of SMEs, and quite a number. So there are all those avenues where young people can participate. Whether they are being utilized fully is probably a question for another day, but at least there are some platforms where you can, where as young people you can. And as YTGen, we have tried to utilize them.
Okay. Yeah. And Youth for Tax Justice Network is where Kafuko John Paul is actually coming from. And this is where we're having our discussions in relation to what the budget cycle means to the youth. This is a bigger question, by the way. What does it mean to the young people? Because first of all, we've had the conversation in our initial stages of the show here, trying to look at the fact that the young people are not that much interested in a lot of sit-down talks or conversations that are lengthy. Neither are they interested in reading all these statistics as written in files and books presented by the Ministry of Finance and the other key stakeholders within the budget allocations and the budget breakdowns. What does it mean to them? Before we even involve them in there, do they really know what the budget cycle means to them?
Yeah, so thank you very much. What does the budget cycle mean to them? In my view, the budget cycle affects all of us, because at the end of the day, what you're going to, for example, go and purchase at maybe at a shop. You're going to, for example, go and buy soap, or you're going to buy sugar, you're going to buy, all these items have a tax component on them. You, for example, if you go and buy a kilo of sugar at, say, 4,000, or there's always a percentage of it, which is a tax bit of it. So, you know, when, as I was explaining earlier, the budget cycle involves where is money coming from.
And exactly.
Where is the money
coming from us?
Exactly, the taxes and, you know, and all that stuff. So government, whenever government is looking for money, they are going to look at the taxes. Where, for example, right now, we have a tax on internet, 12% of the data you buy is tax, 12% goes for taxes. So at the end of the day, most of these things here we are consuming, they all have a tax component to them. So it pays for us to get interested in the budget cycle, because we have to understand that these things affect us. If the 12% tax on the internet affects you, raise your voice as a young person, maybe tell government that, you know, this is excessive for us. Probably we need to get money from elsewhere aside from you know, taxing the internet, which is very beneficial to us. We have so many young people who are doing business online, and of course this tax affects them in a negative way, perhaps. But also for the young people doing business online, they're also taxed. You know, we have, for example, in the tax bills of this year, they're introducing a tax on digital service providers. Usually those are, let's say, Facebook, Twitter, or, you know, those big companies which are providing digital services. And usually the way taxes work, it is usually transferred to the consumer. You know, it is transferred to the consumer. So in as much as Facebook, for example, will pay, but they will increase the service for you as a consumer. For example, if you want to advertise maybe on Twitter or Facebook, they can up the price. So that price increase caters now for the what? For the tax. So young people should be interested in this, because at the end of the day, whatever you do is going to, whatever you consume, whatever you take in, the clothes you're putting on, the food you're eating, at the end of the day, government has a touch on it. You know, they can decide to increase prices. You remember when there was an increase in fuel prices, almost everything went up. And you know, at the end of the day, government is getting something. So it's up to us to come up and say, you know what, these taxes are not, they are excessive, they are affecting our way of lives. Maybe we should utilize other means. Then maybe I can also talk about the component of debt, because it's also one of the ways that government gets money. You know, we keep borrowing, and as I said earlier, government is spending a lot of money on in the budgets. The money that is collected is again used to repay debts, past debts, and usually it is just interest.
And surprisingly, the debts continue accumulating every year.
Continue accumulating every year. So we are in that very continuous, terrible cycle, and as young people, it it affects us a lot, because at the end of the day, we are here, we are still here, we still, for example, we still have probably 10 or 20 years alive. And usually the people who are accumulating these debts are very old people, probably they're in the later days of their life. But for us as young people, we are going to struggle with this. I remember there was something in a newspaper, I think it was New Vision sometime, and they were saying that every person in Uganda now owes debts over 1 million shillings.
1.5.
Yeah, 1.5. Thank you for that. You can imagine now. Some people don't even have 1.5 million in their pockets.
And the questions we have is, how do we reach here? How do I owe government
exactly.
that amount of money, yet I've not even
you haven't even benefited or wherever. Exactly, because at the end of the day, for them to repay back that money, they are going to tax you excessively now, so that they get that money and be able to pay back. Either they will tax you excessively, or they are going to get another debt and pay it back. But then again, you have to suffer the consequences of paying the new accrued debt.
Okay. Yeah. Speaking of tax justice, it gives me an idea of a discussion for now, as we rotate around the idea that businesses in Uganda are collapsing every after 2 years of the business. You start your business up today, it won't stay for 5 years. Within just your few months of operation, you've already felt the pinch. You either sell off the business, close down the business, go back to employment, or bring in someone else to help you out, or shift from where you've been working for or either way, stop paying the taxes. When you talk about tax justice, every business person is crying foul to URA, saying that the reason we are here is because the reason as why we are closing down is because the taxes look to be too high. And at times we don't even want to comply to paying them because we can't survive.
Yeah.
And now this pinch is actually being felt by the youth in business. As a tax justice person here, from the perspective of Youth for Tax Justice Network, which engagements have you been having on behalf of the youth in business, and to create at least some simple harmony of understanding for URA to at least understand the pressure under which these young people are operating?
No, thank you. That is a very critical question, because it's something we are suffering with as a youth organization. That is the story of most youth, closing business, either they are evading taxes. But we've done some research and we found out that the reason why taxes are bogging down young people in business, first of all, the knowledge on tax is a bit difficult. Okay. Yeah, it's most young people do not really take time to understand these aspects of tax, especially when you're entering a business, what are the consequences, from a tax point of view. Most people do not really pay attention to this. So there is that knowledge gap around young people. For example, now, usually when you get 18, you are required to file returns. There are so many young people who don't know that. And failure to file returns is penalized. You are penalized with a certain amount of money. It's usually, I think, 200,000 shillings. And on that 200,000 shillings, there is, I think 2%, which keeps on accruing every month as long as the principal amount remains unpaid. So if, for example, you are supposed to pay a monthly tax, let's say pay as you earn, or maybe VAT, and you fail to do that, you are penalized. So there has been a lot of ignorance. Most of the young people don't know that, but also not knowing how to do the filing returns, because it's not everyone can do it. It requires some technical skills. Of course, I know URA has done some work. We've also done some work in sensitizing, but every day people come up with businesses. So it is something that is continuous. So for us, what we usually do, we always encourage young people that, for example, before you enter into a business, try to do some research around the tax consequences. What are you going to be required to do from a tax perspective, when it comes to filing returns? How are you going to do it? Can you do it on your own, or can you hire someone, or maybe can you go and do some training? We always do trainings, and we always help young people to do that, to do the returns and whatnot. Yeah, so it has been, first of all, that knowledge gap. Okay. But also, secondly, there's an aspect that we have a challenge that many multinational corporations which are doing business in Uganda are not paying taxes as they should be paying them, And usually that puts the burden now on young people
whose businesses are still young.
Exactly. But you find now, like, for example, the digital service providers I was talking about, the Facebooks, those guys haven't been paying taxes for a long time, And yet they are getting money from Ugandans. Ugandans are doing a lot of business on their platforms and they are getting money, but they haven't been paying anything, So it becomes difficult. It puts the pressure on young people, which makes it difficult for them to survive. Government always looks for the easy target, and usually you as an SME, you're usually the easy target, So there is a problem of these MNCs, which always ship even money out of the country without paying taxes. Some of them pay less. And then also another problem is the tax exemptions that we are giving, that government keeps on giving to different corporations. I think you've seen there are a number of industrial parks in the country which are coming up. And of course, it's done, to boost business and attract foreign direct investment and all that stuff. But they are giving them a lot of tax incentives, a lot. And, you find a person is there, for example, a company, they are given land, they construct, they are not paying any sort of a tax. They have electricity is there, it's okay, everything is okay. And meanwhile, for you as a person trading in an SME, they cannot give you even any small incentive. As soon as you register, you have to pay taxes. You haven't even broken even, but you have to pay taxes. So it's a bit of a challenge. So some of those incentives,
yes,
which are really at the end of, because you see, for example, whenever government gives out an incentive,
true,
there's always a gap
that is left
exactly on who is going to pay that tax.
Okay.
And of course, that tax, at the end of the day, that gap has to be covered.
Okay.
And it usually falls down again to the young people here who are trying to survive, in these normal businesses.
All right. And Kafuko, let's first of all get into a break. And when we return shortly, we're going to be looking at how the youth can participate in the budget cycle. Very big concern there. How can you, as a young person, how can I be part of the cycle? How can I generally get into participating in one decision making? To the budget framework paper discussions and everything, and how will our voice be heard at the end of the day? The discussions continue immediately after the break. You're still watching the Policon.